Hello, day drinkers. Welcome to Day Drinking with Authors, the interview series where I pick a book, the author picks a drink, and we discuss both. I started this podcast as a way to introduce people to authors who didn't get a chance to tour during the beginning of COVID. And now that we're kind of coming out of COVID in a lot of places and in a lot of ways, I've kept doing it because it's given me a chance to continue to read books that I am so excited about, and a chance for me to get to pick the brains of the people who've written the books that I am so excited about. Like, I come to them and I say, look, we're going to do this podcast. And they're like, oh, well, that sounds very interesting. And I'm like, well, mostly it's just a chance for me to ask you all the questions about what you did here. So tonight is no different. Piper Huguley is my guest. We're talking about her beautiful fiction novel called By Her Own Design, about the life and art of Ann Lowe, who was the fashion designer to the Social Register. And we're going to get into what exactly the Social Register is. I'm looking at my camera and I'm realizing that you can see into my closet, and that's embarrassing. I'm sorry. You can see into my closet. Anyway, I'm going to read the back cover copy because my mom likes that. And Mom, you and Aunt Sherry would love this book. You would love it. So here's the back cover copy. The incredible untold story of how Ann Lowe, a Black woman and granddaughter of slaves, rose above personal struggles and racial prejudice to design and create one of America's most famous wedding dresses of all time for Jackie Kennedy. 1953, New York City. Less than a week before the society wedding of the year, where Jacqueline Bouvier will marry John F. Kennedy, a pipe bursts at Ann Lowe's dress shop and ruins 11 dresses, including the expensive wedding dress, a dress that will be judged by thousands. A Black designer who has fought every step of the way, Ann knows that this is only one struggle after a lifetime of them. She and her seamstresses will find a way to recreate the dresses. It may take all day and all night for the next week to accomplish the task, but they will do it. 1918, Tampa. Raised in Jim Crow, Alabama, Ann learned the art of sewing from her mother and grandmother, a former slave, who are the most talented seamstresses in the state. After Ann elopes at 12 with an older man who soon proves himself to be an abusive alcoholic, her dreams of becoming a celebrated designer seem to be put on hold. But then a wealthy Tampa socialite sees Ann's talent and offers her an amazing opportunity, the chance to sew and design clothing for Florida's society elite. Taking her young son in the middle of the night, Anne escapes her husband and embarks on an adventure of a lifetime. Based on the true story of one of the most famous designers of the 20s through the 60s, who has since been unjustly forgotten, By Her Own Design is an unforgettable novel of determination despite countless obstacles and a triumph celebrated by the world. Oh, it's so good, guys. Let's bring in Piper. Hello, Piper.
Hello, Molly. How are you?
I'm very good. I have to say that my kids are still in school. It's the end of June, and I have neglected them and everybody else. My own work.
Don't neglect the children.
I know, well, they're teenagers. I mean,
well, they've neglected you. Then I understand
that. They are delighted that I have been too busy.
Yeah.
Oh, we have so many guests here tonight. I just want to remind you, if you want to ask a question, I keep one eye on the chat. So feel free to ask Piper any question that you might have. We've got people from all over the place. Minnesota and Lincoln, Alabama. AL is Alabama. I've been in Canada too long. So first of all, we have to discuss this drink. We're having mimosas.
There it is.
There it is. This is what was served at Ann Lowe's first
and only
showing. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Utterly and completely crazy. She's always doing stuff on a shoestring. And she had talked about this to some of her clientele once. And they were like, well, let's just put something together. And it'll be a brunch, so mimosas. And we'll just, instead of hiring models, it could be some of your clients from the Social Register who will model. So that was the one and only.
I feel like it's one of the themes of the book, how women in her life have supported her and stabbed her in the back. Yes. Or not just stabbed her in the back, or or denied her the credit. We're in a position and denied her the credit. And I have a lot of questions. The first thing let's talk about is how this book actually came to you. Was this another Twitter conversation, an editor? How did this work?
Yeah, so people who know me know that my main social media platform is Twitter. And my editor, who is someone that I had known from before, meeting her at various writing conferences and stuff, tweeted out or retweeted someone's article about Ann Lowe. And she had been someone who has gotten other people contracts in this way before, even without the what is it, the MSWL hashtag. She's just,
Mhm.
every people who follow her know she's an editor, and from time to time she'll just tweet out, "Does somebody want to write a novel about this?" So when I saw the article about Ann Lowe, I'd always known in the back of my mind, because I was a Kennedy aficionado, that she had designed Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress, but I didn't know the particulars of her life. So I went right away on the internet, looked her up, read some things about her, and I was like, oh, yes, okay, that I can write a novel about. And the biggest nerd thing was that I knew that I was going to start with the prologue, because when I saw her death day being the day after Charles and Diana got engaged, I knew that already. So I was like, that's where I'll start the book.
Just
So,
tying her past to the future of what wedding gowns were
mhm,
going to be after that royal wedding. It was a
yes,
very, and
mhm,
it was one of those things that as you're reading it, and it's a really immersive book, and you do a little bit of, kind of you play around with timelines, which I'm here for. I love that sort of thing all the time.
mhm.
Um, oh, now I forgot. Piper, what was I saying?
I don't know.
I think I'm gonna, this is gonna be another one of those interviews where I'm gonna try to make questions out of my fangirl squeeing. Um, yeah, it was just a sort of a remarkable
Yeah, it just made
writing
me
on the life.
wonder, like, what, because she, even after that, the most famous commission, she kept chasing them. So I was just wondering if she had been, I don't even know if she was like cognizant or awake or whatever, but if she had been, what she might have thought of the fact. Because
Yeah,
having had been alive at that time, I remember how everybody's like, is that dude ever gonna get married? It was like
yeah.
that kind of thing by the time he got
And
engaged.
what do you think she would have thought about the dress? About Diana's dress?
Well, she liked big and over the top. So she might have been in there with, what they had done. And Diana's dress, remember that style at that time, all that gunny sacks and all of that other
Mhm.
kind of stuff. It was very much in line with what people liked at the time. But it also, and somebody else that pointed this out, was very much the like a little girl fantasy of bridal
Fairy
dress.
fairy
And when
tale.
you think about the fact she was just barely 20.
So, what was you make a comment in your author's note that particularly the beginning of her life, like there's very little information. She is born in the deep
Mhm.
South,
Yep,
Alabama,
yep,
the Jim Crow South, in a time when her life is not treasured or valued.
yep.
And there's a census report that is clearly not right. So
Mhm.
how difficult was the research for this book, considering you're trying to find the beginning of this life?
Well, historical fiction people are always like, "Well, what are your sources?" They always want to examine that and everything. And one of the things that's most interesting about this, maybe we should call it a renaissance or an entree of so many Black authors into the historical fiction field, is the fact that we don't have the same access to resources in those traditional ways, the ways that I teach them to my students, so that they
Mhm.
could learn how to do collegiate research. We don't have access to those things in regards to Black people because of what you just said. I knew this to be the case, especially from a genealogical point of view, because my ancestors come from a county, two counties over from where Ann Lowe was born.
Oh,
My
wow.
great grandmother was her contemporary. She was also born in the 1890s. And I knew more about what her childhood would look like because of my paternal great grandmother. and because of my own scholarship with Zora Neale Hurston, who was also her contemporary in terms of time and was born in Alabama. So everybody talks about Zora Neale Hurston in Florida, but she was born in Alabama, also in the same region as Ann Lowe. So I was able to cobble those things together to get more of a viewpoint in terms of her childhood. And that's the kind of thing that, in terms of writing about a Black biographical fiction subject, that we have to do in terms of those things. And to also sort of think about research sources in a different way, like her dresses, the works of her hands, and what that means as another kind of research resource that other writers might just skip over or not consider as very important.
Did you one of the most lovely and fascinating parts of the book for me was how beautifully you created female communities. So she had her mother and her grandmother. She had her sister at the end of her life, but she also, this pipe burst, and she has to go. She goes to the church and is like, "Help!" And like,
yes.
like before she's even done saying it, people are like standing up, and they're going to sew for her.
Yes.
Was that information that you were able to find, or was that something that you just know to be true about women in the church, about mothers, grandmothers, daughters in that community?
Yeah, that's where I really drew upon that from, in terms of this little sort of continuing circles of female friendship and relationship, was from what I knew to be true in terms of Ann Lowe being a Southern woman, and all of that kind of thing. So, and yeah, so that's why that was a very important theme, especially because it's for people who know me from my romance novels and stuff.
Yeah.
Not a romance. So,
oh my gosh, I mean, so much so.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to talk about it. She was the census report that when she is living with her first husband has her at like 22.
Yeah, 21. Yeah.
You think he lied?
Yeah, I think he lied. I think he lied. I think some census taker came and he just took the information from him. She, again, because Black people at that time didn't have birth certificates, like my great grandmother doesn't have a birth certificate from that region in Alabama. There's no, like you said, like the factual data kind of resource that we would rely upon in order to be able to ascertain her age and figure out, was she a child bride or not. But she held pretty firmly to her age throughout her life. Unlike Zora Neale Hurston, who just varied it all over the place. She held very
creative freedom.
Oh yeah. Pretty firmly to her age, and the fact that when she died at like 82 or 83 years old, which really is a quite advanced age for a Black woman of her circumstance and time. One who I suspect at the beginning of her life was malnourished, because of her very slight stature. Is one of the things that I had always thought, and it was one of the things I tried to carry throughout the book, is in terms of how petite and little she was, that I think had to do with not having had that good, nutritious kind of start. So for her to have lived that long was an amazing thing. If she had been, it's okay. Somebody chiming in.
Yeah,
if she had been another 9 years older than that, that would have been really quite remarkable. And having had been in touch with the family since, this is something that they've confirmed in terms of her having been a child bride.
Wow. I mean, talking about it not being a romance, that was harrowing, and I thought really well done on your part, where you didn't settle into the horror of it. And I think that has so much to do with how you handled her point of view, right? Like there was a certain element of her. Tell me how you created, because there are interviews with her when she's an older woman, but tell me
that
how
I
you
read
treat.
through newspapers and magazine articles. The holy grail of what I've been looking for while I was writing this was the Mike Douglas show interview that I knew was somewhere in Philadelphia, but I could not. I tried through so many emails, etc., to get people to
Wow.
go and find it. They didn't care who I was, so nobody went and found it. So I had to go on other things in terms of creating that voice, in terms of supposition. But now they found it. Now it's out there on the internet. So when I finally got to see it, I was pleased that it was very much in line with what I thought and who I thought she was. It was like my paternal ancestors,
Mhm.
who had a certain amount of dignity and carriage, and very much a Southern belle in
Yeah.
terms of that particular aspect. So yeah,
You really
I was yeah
She really
pleased.
seemed to value, and I mean, her work, you can see it in her work. She really valued being a lady and being
Mhm.
feminine and like having um that. I mean, you did an amazing job creating that relationship with her and Jacqueline Kennedy, right? Where
Mhm.
she just really liked how ladylike she was.
Yes.
So is there a certain amount of fear when you're writing, when you are pulling together these pieces and sort of creating a character that's also a real human? Is there a certain amount of fear of getting it wrong? Is there a certain character trait or plot line that you jump to that you weren't entirely sure was going to be going to be right? I mean,
Mhm.
that's what I'm thinking as a writer. That would have been one of the things I would have been scared of.
Well, it's that, but the other aspect of it is if it's something like that, I wouldn't have selected the story to
Mm,
begin with. It's like there are other things, like Tessa's tweeted out about other things, and I didn't see the story in them. So that's me, that's for somebody else. It's not
right.
for me. Um, but in terms of that aspect of sort of this certainty in terms of their voice, Ann Lowe in particular had a very clear trajectory in terms of her life, like a character. When we create a fictitious character, they have to have a goal, and what is their motivation for having a goal and all of that. And this was what she wanted to do all of her life. And so other people come along saying, oh, I wish she had kept a diary or something. She didn't want to do anything else but do those
I mean, she
dresses.
didn't.
What are
She
you
didn't.
talking about? Oh, I wish she had sat down and wrote about herself. She did not care about that. She cared about making those dresses. That's the legacy. That's her diary. Look at it.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
yeah.
even to the point that she dressed herself. I mean, you look at pictures of her and it's on your cover. I mean, you must have been thrilled with that cover. She wore a black
After 9
dress.
go-rounds. Mhm.
Oh God. Oh my God. Do you want to get into that? I mean, covers are hard. You got to fight. Was it? I mean,
Yeah.
okay. So we're going to take a real quick tangent into Coverland. The the detail on the label at the top, that is, the
Mhm.
font is like the label on
Embossed,
her
yeah.
dresses. Yeah.
Mhm,
I mean,
mhm. Yeah, I thought it was a really cool touch, for them to have done, because the label for designer is everything. It's everything in terms of what goes on that label. So it
yeah.
was very, very clever, they had done that. But there yeah, but in terms of things they were showing my editor, she didn't like it, what they were showing her, and she wasn't ready to show them to me. Then when they showed what they had to me, I was like, "Are you kidding me? This is not." I was like, "I don't know how to draw anything but stick figures, but I'll be happy to draw some and come up there to New York and show you what I mean." And there's this whole aspect about, well, it can't look too much like a nonfiction cover because it's not a biography. And everything that we see with Ann Lowe, she's not centering herself. And I said, well,
Right.
then that's the thing. She has to be centered. This is her time to shine. She must be centered.
Yeah.
So somebody there is going to figure out a way about how to center her.
I am not a cover designer, but yeah, it is. And I don't, when you get a cover that is a, like, that you open up the email and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
so pleasing. It's
Mhm.
like you just see the trajectory of your book. It's just so exciting. And that fight sometimes to get the cover right can fill you with some doubt. I
Yeah.
know that all too
Yeah.
well. That
But
like, is it
and they get particularly considering this is my first like Conrad William Morrow. I'm nobody to them. They don't know what I can do or whatever. But I think part of why they wanted to get it right was because they knew this was a different kind of novel and for them, etc. So I guess they put up with me in terms of that particular aspect and sent me like these 4 covers. And even the other 3 that I rejected were they were much better, but it was clearly this one.
Yeah, it's
So,
beautiful.
mhm,
It's really beautiful. So one of the questions that I really like to ask authors is, and I'm not talking about research about Ann Lowe. I'm talking about you and your relationship to writing.
mhm.
What did this book teach you about you and your relationship to writing? Anything?
Yeah,
Did you learn any new tricks?
that's always a good question to ask because every time I do take on a project, I try to do something a little new. I try a little bit of a stretch goals in terms of that. And I think the aspects with the timeline and my thoughts about it being not just the prologue, which I had also never done before.
Mhm.
So that was new and taught me something. And yes, a lot of authors have been saying you gotta have to have a prologue. This is the kind of thing you would do in terms of a prologue, which has been very gratifying. But the thought of the plot, and I mean the narrative in terms of focusing on what had to be one of the worst days of her life and wrapping the story around that and sort of that her life as it's told is told kind of in the background as they're working on these dresses. So that's
So
what it is.
the worst day you're referencing is this pipe bursting in the
Mhm,
shop and
mhm,
literally destroying this wedding dress and all the bridesmaid dresses. And decides that she can do it. She goes to the church, gets some seamstresses. But the other thing about it is that she refuses to ask, um, tell the ambassador, Ambassador Kennedy, and get money. So these kind of come
right.
out of pocket for her.
Yep. She lost great deal of money on it. And she talked about that in the Mike Douglas show appearance, which was a cool thing to get her side of it. Yeah, and I made it more dramatic than what it actually was, but it happened, and it happened because she was she was so thrilled with this particular commission. She had the dresses on mannequins
Mhm.
around the shop so that she could see them. So if she hadn't done that, it might not have happened that way. But the story she tells is that the ceiling of the shop was kind of flimsy, and the
Oh,
dude up above had a party and left the tub overflowing, which is what had happened.
so
But
that's the reality, or is that what?
that was the reality. That's
Yeah.
what she said at what had happened in terms of the destruction. But again, another aspect in terms of people keeping them turning the pages was to say that someone in the course of her life, from her life story, had done this. So
Yeah, that was
that's what I
good.
come up
That was a
with.
good
Yeah.
that was a good little
Mhm.
gasp.
So yeah, that was.
It's funny, I love prologues. And I mean, they're one of those things that like there was a period of time where they were really out of vogue. Like
Mhm.
editors didn't want them. I had so many prologues cut.
Yeah.
But I like how they just sort of like they like sit you in the story, right? Like
Mhm.
you get a little bit a breath, you see the room, you see the world, and then we get going. And
Yes.
I I really dug the way that you started that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, because I said it's my first one.
One of the
So.
things also, she talks a lot about her, or and in the book thinks a lot about the importance of foundation garments
Yes.
and how like she was sewing them into dresses and they created
Mhm.
and I really started thinking that there's a lot that goes into a book that you can't put down that are like foundation garments and that you don't see
Mhm.
them.
Yep.
They are invisible, but they really create the story. And one of the things that I really think about is point of view, and not just like third person or first person or present or past, but who is this character talking to. And I
Mm-hmm.
felt like you did a really interesting thing with that. Can you talk about how you decided to create her point of view?
Well, like I said, that was this whole aspect in terms of me thinking about how is it that somebody who's in a first person circumstance, what is the aspects under which they're telling their story? How does it come out of them? And it may also have to do with my background as an autobiography scholar in
Mhm.
terms of thinking about what people reveal and what they don't reveal in terms of the course of their life story as they're writing it, as they're developing it. And that, the whole aspect of autobiography is that it's the least likely place for somebody to reveal themselves. So all of that's based in terms of what somebody's going to tell you and what they're not going to tell you is very important. So that's always a balance that I try to keep and maintain. But the one of the whole points in this, I was doing a Facebook thing last night, and somebody's like, "Oh, what about Jackie? Oh, I remember." I'm like, as I say, this is Anne's story.
Mhm.
And, to the pointed fact of that, one of the things that might draw people to the book is the fact that, yes, she had this, what ended up being a decades long relationship with Jackie and her family, but that it's not going to be the foremost thing. And it's not going to be the most important thing in terms of her life story. And
And you
that's the way I wanted to treat that.
I felt like the mystery, like that Anne isn't gonna know Jackie's
Right.
inner thoughts,
Mhm,
right? I mean,
mhm,
Jackie was,
mhm.
from what we know, an intensely private person, and I felt that was great. But then you have this little tiny like chapterlet where you're like,
Right.
in Anne's point of view, she's like, I know why you're here.
Mhm, mhm,
You
mhm.
want this gossip, and I'm not gonna give it to you.
Yep.
I just thought, like, so
Yeah.
like, was that I mean, that like it's a slight departure from the rest of the story.
Mhm,
Was that your
mhm,
decision? Were you like,
mhm. Yep.
in the rough draft, you were like, I gotta make sure to get this in?
Yep. And I always wondered, so I was wondering, is Tessa gonna take this out? Is she gonna take it out? Somebody's gonna talk about it or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I was like ready to defend it, to say, this is why this is in here. I like to it's sort of kind of meta in a
Yeah,
way, that say, I know you want to know about her, but
not this
that's
story.
not yeah, I'm not the one. So
And
I'm
you
gonna
and
get
you
it
did
from
it
you.
in her voice, this voice
Mhm.
that you've created, which is another one of the tremendous foundation pieces of this story. Um, that it just felt like like Anne was just taking you aside. She was like, look, not gonna,
Mhm. Yeah,
you're not
it's
getting that
not
mess
you're
from
not
me.
getting it. So, yeah, she doesn't with Jacqueline Bouvier does not appear until the last third of the book because it's not her life,
Yeah,
in terms that she was an older woman when, that acquaintance with her mother
yeah.
first happened. So, and so again, on the Mike Douglas show, which was taped a little more than a year after the assassination, of course, they want to know about all of that and stuff. And she immediately segues into talking about Janet Auchincloss, who, like I said in the book, she says, like, the most beautiful woman I've ever known, which was really it's something to say and to keep
Yeah.
insisting upon saying it in the wake of the post aftermath of the assassination when everybody was still, so enamored of Jackie and everything. It's a very interesting comment. But again, there's all of that in terms of what someone like that is going to say and what they keep silent.
Yeah, what they're gonna not say. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, another thing that I really felt, is I felt, I mean, this is kind of a bizarre thing to say, but I felt your affection for her. And I
Hmm.
wondered, is that maybe partly, obviously, I mean, she has a body of work that is breathtaking and gorgeous. Your grandmother or your great grandmother, I'm sorry, your great grandmother would have been a
Hmm.
contemporary. Like you have that sort of familial sort of connection. Um, you're an artist. She was an artist. You have those great scenes where like she, she and her second husband are getting ready to have sex, and she's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
gotta go write something."
Yeah.
I mean, you must have felt such a kinship. I mean, I felt reading it. I felt the kinship in a lot of those scenes. But you must have felt, I feel like I felt your connection to her.
Yeah, I think that was very cool thing that you picked up on. You're right. I mean, the thing I like to think about this story is that really anybody can read it. If you read it as someone who is in pursuit of their dream, it's a very American story in that particular way, that it's not, just limited to a Black woman's perspective. Everybody who's in pursuit of a dream, you face these obstacles and you have to decide what it is you're going to do about them and all of that other kind of stuff. And it's the same thing with me. I'm, trying to have wider distribution and hopefully pursue what I call phase two of my writing career in terms of
I
writing
love it.
by. That's what it is. It's like the
Yeah.
launch of phase two, of writing biographical historical fiction about these Black women who have not had their stories to be told before, and I'm hopeful that it's successful. But it's the same kind of thing in terms of there's all of these bumps in the road, and I mean of all kinds of things. So
Yeah.
yeah, I very much have a kinship with her in that way.
You ask in your reader questions. As a person who's had to write reader questions, I mean, you're done with this. You've written this book. You've edited this book like 30 times. You're ready for this book to not be in your life anymore. And then they're like, what do you want? It's like, oh. But you ask, do you think Anne was happy? Did Anne have a happy life? And I mean, I have not done. The only thing I know about her is what I've read in that book, and I feel like you created a woman who felt very happy in her life. Do you feel that way?
Well, it's interesting because with my editor, one of the things that she wanted to know is I wrote the prologue and then wrote some other pages before she would agree to contract it. And one of the things she talked about in the initial Zoom conversation was, we want to make sure the ending is hopeful. And I said, well, I know just where to end it then, because beyond that, she had a lot of struggle there in those last years of her life. And it becomes a question of, was it all worth it? And so I begin the book in terms of talking about her losing her eyesight and the whole aspect of what that meant continuously over time, to want to do what she wanted to do, but that it cost her her eyesight. It's something to think about, You even think about it in terms of, was Caleb worth the loss, and, other things. I don't want to spoil anything, but worth the cost. And the fact that, where I had her in terms of the shop, she had many more shops than that.
Yeah, you'd said you kind of condensed for the sake of the story.
I had to condense, for the sake of the story. But the aspect of that is she did not give up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, she runs away, it's in the back cover copy. She runs away in the middle of the night with her son from her abusive, pedophile husband. And then this handsome guy with nice arms kind of wanders into your life. And as a reader who loves romance, who is like at her core romance reader, I was like, don't do it. And don't do it. Don't even fall for those arms. Falls for the arms. There was this, and I mean, the last part of her life, there's tragedy with her son, there's tragedy with the IRS, there's a lot that happens. But yeah, she wasn't going to stop.
She wasn't going to stop. And that's, you have your dream, and that's your dream or whatever. It really is a tribute to think about, somebody who is very determined and does not want to stop.
Another thing that I thought you did really well and it was very fascinating was balancing. She had a couple of situations that happened in her life where she would have a white patron, a woman who would offer her a giant thing, like an unbelievably giant thing. And there you had a line kind of running through it where her mom or her grandmother was like, find yourself a white person. Like, that's the only way to survive right now.
Yeah.
And and that was really compelling. But you walked that really interesting line where she had doubt and fear about what the world was going to allow her to have, and the guts to try it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That's like I said, that's consistent with, like I said, even my life in terms of this. You know, I was Agent Poison for a very long time.
Agent Poison, as in
Yeah.
not.
Well, agent, yeah. You know, I could query or whatever, but you know, when I was talking about a particular historical idea that I've had for some time to an agent who was giving out cards to people, and she had the cards and she put them in her purse and moved away from the crazy, you know. So I was like, oh, okay, it's like that. Wow.
Well, when Tessa tweeted this idea, or you know, this wanting a book like this, and you said yes, were you agented at the time?
At the time I was. And that was the funny thing, in terms of that, where when I had kind of stopped looking, even though I was working on a different biographical historical project. And I'd stopped looking, but then I started putting some feelers out there on this one, and I started getting like full requests, like repeatedly full requests.
For the Ann Lowe story?
No, for
a
something
different
else.
project.
Yes. And so I looked at my email one time, and my agent sent me an email, and I was like, is this for real? I was like, somebody approaching me, Agent Poison, can this be true in terms of this? And it's interesting because she fulfilled all of the sort of the requirements I was looking for in terms of somebody with a vision in terms of what it was that I was seeking to do, whatever. And she had that. So.
You know, that's like another interesting parallel to the book that I felt as a writer. And she had these patronesses who were like, look, I know you're scared, but you're going to get on this plane because like,
yeah,
I'm paying for it. And this is the right thing for
Mhm.
you to do. So you sit there and be nervous and make your art and make these beautiful gowns, and I'm going to take care of this other thing. And I thought, gosh, that was miraculous that came along for her.
Yes.
Can you tell us what you're working on now, or not, without any?
Yeah, no, I'm contracted to work on it's a book called American Daughters, and it is about the secret interracial friendship between Portia Washington and Alice Roosevelt, who are the daughters of Booker T. Washington and Theodore Roosevelt, respectively. And it's an interesting book, particularly at that point in time, because in 1901, shortly after Teddy became president after the assassination of McKinley, he invited Booker T. Washington to the White House for dinner. And the uproar that ensued because Booker T. Washington was the first Black man invited to the White House like that. Somehow their two daughters, who had a lot in common, managed to find their way to a friendship that lasted for a very long time. So.
Oh wow! So are there letters? Like, do you have? Like,
there are not letters in terms of this now.
Yeah. Why are you making this so hard?
That's what I'm saying, is in terms of the reason that it's secret, because one of the ongoing themes of the story is like, is it possible for a Black woman and a white woman in this time period to be real and true friends? And what does that look like in terms of their friendship? So,
I just really, really quickly, I'm very excited about that. We also have some people who are very excited about it.
Yay, I like that.
Yeah. Are you working on it now, or are you done?
Yes. It's the deadline of September 1st. So.
Oh, geez, there's nothing like writing a book through the summer. Oh my goodness.
Okay.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Well, Piper, thank you so much for coming to talk about this beautiful book. I truly can't recommend it enough. And it has so much to do with it's a fascinating story. It's one of those historical novels that you're like, done reading it, and I had to spend 20 minutes looking up these dresses.
Yeah.
It's just, they're just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
But your voice and the way that you embodied this woman with all of the things that are universal and exciting. And she is an artist and a mom and a sister and a granddaughter and a woman of her community in a way that I couldn't put it down.
Thank you.
So thank you for that.
So much.
Everybody out there, please, stay safe, have a drink, read a book. We'll see you next time. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.